Hey everybody, it's Janet Perez with The Painted Saguaro, and I'm here today with Paint Couture on their page to show you how to create a really beautiful statement piece in your home. I'm taking a piece that's very basic and just brown mahogany toned wood, and I'm creating a beautiful textured piece with it. So this is the finished product, so you can see how I go through all the processes. After cleaning it thoroughly, I decided I wanted to sand the top off because I want to do a paint wash on it. So I'm using my sander with an 80 grit sandpaper, followed by 120 grit sandpaper, and then a 220 grit sandpaper to get a really nice smooth finish on the top of this surface. It's solid wood, so I'm not worried about sanding back too deeply against veneer or anything like that. And I just want to make sure that all of the stain is removed off this piece before I go to the next step. This is one of the two top drawers, and I did this obviously to both drawers, but I'm doing a raised stencil. And I'm using the embossing medium from Paint Couture mixed with some Espresso paint to get this really beautiful brown. And it won't really show later as far as the color goes, but I wanted to make sure I used a darker color on this. And you can see that it's really easy and creamy to spread on. So now that I've got the raised stencils done, I'm using Modern Rattan, and I'm going to cover the entire piece with it using the Paint Couture brush. It's a beautiful brush. It's silky, it leaves no brush strokes, and I love it. And as you can see, even though I'm painting over a really dark piece, I'm getting excellent coverage with this Paint Couture paint. You really only need about 1.5 coats total. So I'm going to continue painting this. And of course I paint the sides, the base, and everything with this Modern Rattan color before I'm done. I did not paint the top two drawers because I wanted to make sure that those raised stencils were completely dry. So that's why I'm avoiding those at this point in time. So now what I'm doing here is I am filling in some nail holes that were holding on some faux keyhole hardware. And unfortunately, the next step I have, I lost. So I'm going to tell you right now, and you'll see it in the next image. But what I do next to create some texture and some layers to this piece is I add some salt wash. And the salt wash goes around the edges or wherever you want that bottom layer to show through your top layer. And you sprinkle the salt wash with your hand around the piece where you want it, and then you spritz it really well with water. You let it dry completely and totally before you go on to the next step. Okay, so now I'm moving on to the next step, and that is adding Angel Eyes, which is a gorgeous Paint Couture color, sort of a Tiffany blue, I would say. And I'm stippling this over that texture and over that layer of Modern Rattan. The stippling is in order to not disturb the powder, even though it's rock hard. I mean, it literally turns out to be almost like cement, but I don't want to disturb it with my brush. And so I'm using just a standard chip brush that I don't care about too much. And I'm gonna cover the entire front of these drawers with this technique. And I'm doing all of the drawers like this. So you'll see I'm gonna take some shortcuts here because we're limited on time, and plus you've got better things to do than sit and watch me paint the same thing over and over again. But it's important to make sure that you cover all of that white powder, the salt wash, in order to get this technique to work. But you don't want it to be too thick. You don't want the paint to be so thick that it might crack as it dries. Okay, so we're done with all of the drawers. So now it's time to do a wash on the frame. I'm using some of the same color, Angel Eyes, and I'm mixing it with about 50% water. Mixing it up in a little paper bowl so that I can do a wash over this Modern Rattan color, because I want this piece to have lots of layers and lots of character. So again, my brush of choice for this type of technique is using a cheapo chip brush. You can pick them up at your local hardware store or online for literally $1 or less per brush, because they're natural bristle, they give you great texture, and for things like this where you're pouncing or you're stippling paint and you're abusive on the brushes, you don't care about these brushes because they're disposable after a few uses. So I'm making sure that I cover all of the frame with this Angel Eyes blue paint wash, and then I'm blotting it back. You know, there's two different techniques you can use when you're doing a paint wash. You can either spritz it and basically wash the wash away, if that makes sense, or you can do this technique where you blot it when it's still very wet, and it removes less paint. It makes it more of an even wash, and I personally prefer the look for this type of finish that I'm going for on this piece. Now you can see by those drips, this is really wet paint, and that's exactly how you want it. You want it to be soupy, so that it goes on really easily and comes off really easily. So I'm spritzing it just a little bit just to even give it a little more moisture, and then I'm dabbing it back with my rag. The reason I added a little more paint there is because I removed too much and I want the edges to have sort of that darker tone of the blue there, so that explains what I'm doing here. And I love the look. So here I'm adding some gold leaf adhesive. As you can see, it goes on kind of cloudy, and you want to be really careful that you only get the adhesive where you want the gold leaf to stick to. That's why I'm using an artist brush and getting excruciating detail on this, so that I'm going up to the line for the top but not going over, because I don't want any gold leaf on my top, and if there's adhesive there, the gold leaf will stick there. Another thing I'd like to touch on is using the proper adhesive for gold leaf. I've seen some influencers use things like spray adhesive that's meant for paper, or wood glue mixed with water and things like that. And I don't recommend using any of those products because that's going to compromise the integrity of your finish. So as you can see here, the sizing is completely dry. It's clear, it's shiny. And now I've got my gold leaf out, and I'm going to start applying it here. I've got my scissors. I'm going to cut on about 10 sheets. I'm going to cut about a 1.5 inch width strip so that I can apply this and manage it easier than using a full sheet. As you can see, this is not real gold leaf. This is aluminum gold leaf because it's really thin and it breaks apart really easily. All gold leaf does, really. But basically, I put my gloves on so that I don't have my oils from my fingers affecting the gold leaf. Plus, it's easier to manage the gold leaf sheets with gloves on. So if you have a pair, grab them before you try doing any gold leaf. That's my biggest recommendation. So I run my fingers along the edge to kind of smooth the edges, and then make sure that I'm not leaving any holidays or blank spots where the gold leaf needs to be adhered onto the wood. And the reason I didn't paint the wood before I gold leafed is because it was that kind of dark mahogany red color. Traditionally, gold leaf is applied over a deep, almost like ox blood red so that you can distress it back, or as it ages, you see that red showing through and it looks like aged gold. So here I am just finishing up the gold leaf. I am going to apply these last few pieces, make sure that everything is set and covered, and then take another chip brush, a clean dry one, and kind of go over all of it with that chip brush to remove any flakes or loose pieces from the entire piece. Cleanup time and time for the next step. So here I am. I'm using that same blue wash that I used on the body, and I still had some left. So this is Angel Eyes mixed with 50% water, and I'm doing a paint wash over the top so that it's all cohesive looking. When you're doing the top of any piece, regardless of what you're using, whether it's stain, paint, or your top coat, you want to finish it with long, full length swipes over the top. That way you don't get the stop-start marks on your finish on the top of your piece. Plus it makes for a smoother finish. So as you can see here, I'm lifting the brush as I come towards the center because I want more paint on the edges. And now I'm doing that long sweeping stroke, like I said, to get an even painted finish on this. And you can still see the wood grain through this blue. So it's really a beautiful look for this piece. And there I'm just wiping the paint off of the gold leaf. I haven't sealed the gold leaf yet. That's the next step. So now I am using the Paint Couture pouring resin, and I poured it on. Now this is meant for a lot of different purposes, but I thought I would try it on this piece, and I am so pleased that I did, versus using an actual resin finish, which can take a long time to dry. Basically, I poured this pouring resin on here, and as you can see, I'm smoothing it down with my gloved hand to make sure that I'm getting even coverage, not getting any drips along the edge. And I love how it turned out. It's absolutely beautiful. Now what I'm doing here is I am taking some of the Iron Oxide Pigment, and I am going over the details, going under the handles to get the sort of aged drippy look that Iron Oxide provides a piece. It just adds another layer of age and drama to the piece, which I love. So now I'm going to turn some music on for you guys so that you can watch the process of how I age out a piece using that iron oxide with a little bit of water mixed in with it. And it really goes a long, long way. So you only need a few drops of the iron oxide mixed with about a tablespoon or two of water. And then the sky's the limit as far as the looks you can create. And there you have it, guys. I did add gold to the base because I wanted it to tie in with the gold leaf on the top. That is not gold leafing. That is the Luxe Gold by Paint Couture. And I am so happy with this piece. It's simple, yet it's rustic and it's gorgeous. So thank you so much for joining me with Paint Couture and the Painted Saguaro, and I'll see you next time. Peace out.